let me start with cameras and pictures, and then we'll go on to talk a little bit about audio afterwards. All of this, incidentally, is about one-to-one Zoom, the way we're doing it now. I'm not talking about hybrid events where we might be using more sophisticated cameras or wider camera angles or multiple cameras, although I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So cameras and angles. The place that most people start is with a laptop. And what happens is that unfortunately, the natural angle of a laptop means that what your participants see is, as it were, up your nose. What I'm going to try and do, and I hope this is going to work reasonably well, I'm going to try and switch camera angles as we are talking, so that you get a sense of what I'm talking about, and I can highlight the things which are different. And then I'll show you a little bit more about the setup I use as we move forward. So I'm going to switch to using my laptop, and it shows me a number of things. Firstly, you will see that the angle is much less natural. There's a natural tendency for me to have to look down, but it also means that you're looking up behind me, and it's a less flattering angle. And let's face it, we all need flattering angles on Zoom. The other thing about it, and again, this particular room setup illustrates it perfectly, is I actually have two very bright ceiling lights behind me. If I move out of the way, you will see that it just dazzles the picture. And unless I adjusted the picture, it's really going to wash me out or put me in profile or make me difficult to see or whatever. I've got another light there, which I turn that off. And you'll see also it starts to get quite grainy. So whilst the laptop is a convenient place to start, it's rarely the best camera if you have any options. I've switched back to my webcam. So I have in the setup in my room, and I'll show you the whole setup in a minute. I use my laptop, but it's connected to a separate monitor. So the monitor is on my desk, and that's what I usually use. And I have a separate webcam which sits just above the monitor. Webcams have come, well, when the pandemic started, webcams were in very short supply. They're now freely available. There are a number of different manufacturers and different qualities and so on. But the middle of the range Logitech that I use, the 920, is now around about £70. It plugs in with a USB cable, so it really is plug and play. And it makes a material difference to the quality of the image, both because it gives you the opportunity of having a more natural angle, but also the overall quality of the camera is better. And what do I mean by quality of the camera? Not just the pixel count, but its ability to cope with light and dark and shadow and color. It's all good enough, don't get me wrong. You know, the built-in camera on the laptop is fine, but there may be ways of getting it better. The compromise, if you are using a laptop, is if you possibly can put the laptop on a stand. Either a pile of books, just to raise it up above the desk, or there are some very clever angled stands which put the laptop, as it were, at that sort of angle. And then you can use a separate keyboard if you have one. And again, it just lifts the whole thing up and puts everything in a much more natural angle. Moving on then to the next level beyond that, if you happen to have a reasonable camera, a proper camera, I was going to say a film camera, a digital camera, an SLR type camera, the majority of SLR cameras will also work as a webcam. I have mine set up, and again, I'm going to switch to it now, and you will see that there's a material difference in the overall quality from a number of perspectives. One is, again, the general sense of light. That's in fact a much more natural color. Particularly what you'll see there is what the camera is doing. It's using the size of its lens to get the focus working rather better. So the pictures which are behind me they're not being blurred because I have a filter set. They're blurred because the camera is working much better to get the focus right. I haven't got the angle of this one quite right. I've got it there partly so that it shoots over the top of my monitor, which is where my webcam is. So ideally it would be a little bit closer and a little bit lower. But I wanted to give you a sense of what an SLR is capable of doing. And if I just reach up and adjust the zoom, which I have to just get up so you get an attractive view of my stomach, you can see there, because it's a zoom lens, I can zoom out, and there, in fact, you can see the webcam on the top of my camera as another way of doing things. So, and again, if it's something you want, there's a very inexpensive device that allows you to connect the HDMI cable of your digital SLR into your computer. The fourth thing I want to show you, and again, I'm not going to go into detail about it, but you can actually use a mobile phone as a camera. So here is my mobile phone, which I'm using as a camera. And what it allows me to do is then to show you the setup which I've been talking about. So there's my normal setup at my desk with my monitor. Sitting above it is my webcam. Sitting behind it is my SLR. And over to the side here is my laptop. And that gives you a sense of what it is I've been looking at. And of course, I could use that as my webcam as well. And of course, the cameras on phones are astonishingly good these days. What you wouldn't want to do, of course, is carry it around as I'm having to at the moment. But let me just wander over here and show you clip it so I can see everything that's going on. Sorry if everything's moving around rather a lot. But this is a desk stand that clamps to a desk, has a mobile phone holder on the top. And so if I were to clamp that to my desk and mount my phone on the top, that would be firm and rigid, and that would allow me then to use my phone as a webcam if I didn't want it moving around. Let me stop it all moving around before you all get seasick and come back to my webcam and turn that off. Fine, like that. Okay. So a number of different devices that you could use. There's one really helpful setting in Zoom, which I will talk about now, which is on the Zoom settings. And if I share my screen, and assuming I've got it set up to be able to share my Zoom screen. Right, okay. What I want to show you is one of the settings. So next to the video setting, the little pop-up arrow, which gives you video settings. One of the settings there is adjust for low light. And you can switch it on, you can switch it to manual or to auto. The auto, you can see, isn't great. Certainly not in the light environment I'm in. It's not really doing a good job at all. But if I switch it to manual, I've then got a lot more control over adjusting the picture and getting it much lighter or darker. It's quite dark this evening. I'm not entirely sure why. I suspect I've got something else happening. But if it's a call which is in which you really want to optimize the video, it's something that's worth looking at and adjusting. Let's stop that share. So that was just a brief run through some video stuff. Before I talk about audio stuff, any questions or points anybody wants to raise to talk about? I can see Fiona waving a finger already, and then Anthony. Fiona, on mute.
Okay, then. How do you connect your phone as a camera?
There are a number of bits. The easy answer is it's free software. What I was using was a piece of software called DroidCam through another piece of software called OBS. I will happily write a short note about it. There are a number of ways of doing it. but it does work for both Apple and Android phones. There are a variety of different applications around. The version I was running is the free low resolution version. The high resolution version costs another $7.99 or something. But I will happily write a note and introduce you to the various bits of software that do it.
Thank you. It's really, when I've seen it being really useful, that sort of thing. And by the way, I've put my laptop on a box since you mentioned it. I like this.
Makes a big difference.
Is two things. One is a Skojet cookery demonstration.
Yes.
When mainly the woman was talking to us like this, and then she switched to her other camera, and this is me at the this is me and my hands at the cooker. And then I did it when I was teaching klezmer dancing in my room during the pandemic. So I was sitting just at the thing talking, and then I had the whole room, and I went back and it looked like a studio. Very nice.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You can either have it like you did and switch cameras, or you could potentially have two laptops going at the same time with different cameras, and then just ask your host to switch.
Absolutely.
Spotlight the other one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, number of ways you can do it. Okay.
I have my laptop on a wall bracket, so I'm almost exact eye height to the camera, so it gives me a good view. The other thing is that I, like you, use an external monitor, but in Zoom that can be really useful because I can have the highlight screen on one and all the participants on the other, or if there's a screen share going on. And it really is a very, very good setup to have two screens in Zoom. You can do an awful lot more. As you're not so much being controlled by what somebody else is doing. You can control what you're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anthony, you wanted to?
Mine question is one based on complete ignorance. How did you get to that video settings thing that you showed?
Oh, right. Are you on a PC or on a tablet?
On a laptop.
Right.
PC.
Okay. So down at the bottom where it says stop video, just next to it, there's a little up arrow.
Oh, I see. Yes.
And that
Video
takes you,
settings. I see.
that takes you to all the settings.
Thank you.
That's all right. Anything else on that stuff? One other thing just to mention, which is the position on the screen. Again, it's trivial, but it's again depends on how professional you want to be. If you watch the news, you'll see that most of the time they try to position the camera so that the newscaster's head is close to the top of the picture. In other words, it fills as much of the picture as sensibly can. There's a tendency to end up having your camera so that your face is in the middle of the picture, and it just creates a more natural picture if you tip the camera down a little bit and therefore fill the image a bit more. And it works better if you become Jewish and use your hands when you're talking. I'm ignoring the fact that Fiona has, for whatever reason, decided that filters are very clever. But thank you for the prompt about filters. There are there are multiple sorts of filters that you can use, but the obvious one that some people use are virtual backgrounds. Personally, I'm not an enormous fan of virtual backgrounds. They can be very effective. Some people use them much more effectively than others. Depends on the state of the room in which you're working and so on. Unfortunately, the more cluttered the room, the less well the virtual background works. And it will depend also to some extent on the clothes you're wearing and how fine your hairstyle is and all those sorts of things as to whether it looks as though you're a cardboard cutout or a silhouette. But that's a matter of personal preference.
Mike, 2 points about that. One, Zoom seems to have got better at doing it. And even if it says that you need a blue screen or a green screen, whatever it is, you often don't.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's now this, but I'm sure we'll be covering in one of the, you can now use apps, and some of the backgrounds from the apps are better than the inbuilt backgrounds I've found.
They are. And something that we will cover in one of our future conversations when we talk about how to share PowerPoint, you can actually use PowerPoint as a virtual background.
Ah.
Although you end up small, but it's one of the presentation styles. But yes, there are a number of different ways of doing it. And again, it depends very much on the effect that you're trying to create and what you're trying to hide or lose. There was a question from Marilyn about whether you can use a virtual background without a camera. Not really, in the sense that the virtual background is there to mask everything other than your face. But what you can do is set up a personal profile picture so that when your camera is off, instead of getting your name, you get a personal profile picture, which I will show you now. If I stop my video, you will see a personal profile picture of me, which is, well, you can make your own mind up whether it's a better picture or less good picture, but it gives you the chance to choose your picture. But it feels slightly friendlier sometimes than just having a name popping out.
Mike, you can also use logos like that.
Yes, absolutely. You can use logos, pictures. It's sometimes quite difficult. I haven't worked hard at it to actually get that picture to fill the whole screen. Both yours and mine just then don't fill the whole setting, the whole screen. But again, depends very much on the format of the picture that you're using and how it spreads and so on. Okay, let's talk a little bit about sound now. I'm conscious that being in David Neville's company, I now feel exposed when I'm talking about sound, but I will go for it nonetheless, and then he no doubt will contribute. One of the things that Zoom have done incredibly well is sort out audio. They recognized early on that if you, bearing in mind where Zoom came from, which is for business meetings, that if you've got bad video, the meeting can carry on. If you've got bad audio, you're gonna be in a mess. Let's face it, telephone conferencing was around well before video conferencing, and we all survived it and managed to make the world work. So Zoom has got, and they keep improving it and developing it, an enormous amount of audio processing capability, which has really revolutionized this sort of conferencing. Nonetheless, there are a handful of settings which are worth talking about, but at the moment I want to talk more about devices than settings. Again, going in the same sequence we did before, your laptop or your iPad will have a built-in microphone. The microphone on iPads and on phones tend to be fine. The microphones on laptops tend to be less good. They're the cheapest, nastiest they can put in there. The microphones on webcams are pretty good. That's what I use by default. But I'm going to show you a different microphone and talk about one other and just see whether you can actually hear the difference and whether it makes a difference. Before I go there, though, you may see on some highly professional Zoom calls and webinars, if you like, the presenters or the broadcasters being quite confident about having what I'd call a real proper microphone quite visibly on their table where they are talking into it. I'm not sure whether it's one-upmanship. There is no doubt that that high-end microphones do improve the sound quality, and it depends again on the nature of the presentation and whether it's worth it or not. A lot of the ones that I tend to watch tend to be about technical subjects, and so the techies feel quite happy about having a nice butch condenser mic in front of them. I'm not sure it works quite as well in an average meeting. But one thing which is quite interesting to explore is the microphone built into a standard set of earphones or earbuds, because surprisingly they are remarkably good. This is a relatively cheap and cheerful set of earbuds, which I have plugged into my computer. I'm going to just pop them in my ears and then I will switch the microphone. The switch of microphone setting is exactly the same way as video, only in this case it's on the audio settings. And oh, that's interesting. And despite me knowing it, it's the one I've been using all evening, and I hadn't realized that. So it clearly works even when it's sitting on the table, because you haven't complained about the lack of sound. However, well, it should be working rather better now that it's actually sitting in the right place rather than sitting on my tabletop. What I will do quickly, though, is switch back to the webcam microphone. So I'm now using the webcam microphone. And in my experience, it's pretty good. But because of the nature of the room I'm in, it's a little bit more echoey. It's not quite, it has not got quite the same Radio 4 presence, if you like. If I switch back now again to the earbud microphones, you'll hear the difference. And it just feels more radio-like. And it's for two reasons. One is it's actually a microphone which is probably a marginally better microphone, even though it's cheap and cheerful. But principally, it's just that much closer to the source of the sound. And the further away you are from the source of the sound, the more echoey you will get, the more room reverberation you get. And unfortunately, the room I'm in is quite a lively room, even though I've got the curtains shut. What that also means, though, and if I now switch the, which won't make any difference to you, I've switched the speaker, which I'm using, to being the headset as well. That will often improve the audio as well, because again, one of the things that Zoom is really clever at is cancelling out the echo that you would get of the sound coming out of your speakers and back into your microphone. If you imagine what would normally happen, if one of you were speaking, the sound would come out of my speakers and then back into my microphone. And normally, if that were in a hall, that's the classic case of where you get feedback, where you get the sound whistling. Zoom has got some very, very clever echo cancellation, which minimizes that, but sometimes it compromises the sound quality. By using headphones, you get away from that problem altogether. And then, again, it gives Zoom a chance to improve the sound quality a bit more. So they were the things I wanted to talk about from a sound perspective. Again, let's open it up to the floor. Any questions, comments, observations?
Mike, I'll just say that one of the best investments I did right at the beginning of lockdown was to get a little conference mic, which is a speaker and a mic, and it's much better than the stuff that's built into your laptop, and it Bluetooth connects, cable connects, and it's really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're very good for meetings up to 4 or 6 people.
Yeah.
We've tried using them at our synagogue for our trustee meetings with 8 or 10 people in the room. It's not as good. Again, it's a bit echoey and you're a bit far from it. But yes, again, it gives you that sense of freedom, and both the in and out sound are much, much better.
There was a question in the chat. How are you avoiding interference from multiple mics?
Oh, that's easy. You can only use one at a time. I think I saw that that comment come through. And again, in the same way as I was switching my camera by using the up arrow next to stop video, so I was switching my microphone on the up arrow next to the mute, so the extreme left-hand button. Again, there you go into audio settings. In fact, you can go directly from that pop-up. You'll see select microphone, and you see a range of different microphones there, which you can choose from. But yeah, you can only use one microphone at a time.
Okay.
Can I just ask, when you go into the audio settings and you change from one to the other, there's something that says test. Does that mean that I can hear what you will hear when I test it? Yeah.
Yes. So that test audio is really, really helpful, particularly if you're using multiple devices or playing around. And what test audio allows you to do, it allows you, firstly, Zoom plays you a little tune, so you can make sure that the speaker or microphones you've got selected are working. And then it says test mic, and it just invites you to record a 10-second piece, and it will then play it back to you.
Oh, right. Okay.
And you can hear it. The other way of doing it is to start a meeting and record it, and with your own, start a meeting with only yourself in it. set it to record,
Yeah.
try different settings of both audio and video, and then play back the recording.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Is anybody here a musician, or ever find yourself playing fiddle or melodeon over Zoom? Because there's a setting that you need to know about. If you do that.
You mentioned that because Fiona, because I was trying to remember how to do that the other day, because I was in a meeting where somebody unexpectedly played music, and I thought they're not using the settings that I learned from you about a year ago, and I've now completely forgotten.
Okay, so you go into the microphone, it's original sound, so you go into the little up arrow. You can do it on phones and iPads. The person who's playing has to do it, but the person who's meeting it has to have set it in the first place, which we have. So if you click on the little arrow next to the microphone, click on audio settings. I'll share my screen, and then you can all see it like this. So click on the little arrow next to the thing, click on audio settings, go down till it says show in meeting option to enable original sound, and then you go back to the meeting by closing that, and up on the top you've got a thing that says original sound off, and you can, if you click on it, it says original sound on. So if I was singing, it would be much better than if I have it off. And if I was singing, Zoom tries to change the sound. Anyway, it's easier to demonstrate it. It's easier to demonstrate it with an instrument which I happen to not have with me.
But I mean, depending on what you're listening to, I could hear very clearly the difference because I'm now wearing headphones. When it went on to original sound, there was more background noise.
Much more.
Because Zoom was not doing its reduced noise and echo cancelling and so on, but the overall fidelity of the sound was much clearer. So this is where I said Zoom has got incredibly clever audio processing, but only if you're in the right situation to use it. They've optimized for speech, in other words. The other thing they've done by optimizing for speech is they allow you to work with a much more limited internet connection. And what it also does, which I find incredibly clever, is if there is a slight hiccup on the receiving person's internet connection, it will actually delay the sound and play catch up. So if you were counting 1 to 10, you might hear it go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that was Zoom playing catch up. It is that clever because they've recognized the importance of getting audio right.
Can I just say, I have regular music sessions with a couple of friends, and we experimented with original sound because one of them has sort of some hearing issues, and we found it doesn't, she says it doesn't make a huge amount of difference to her.
Yeah.
What Zoom does is it wants everything to sound like a voice, and so it flattens the low and high sound. So if you're playing flute or something, it loses a lot of the flutes or the high sounds of the fiddle, but it depends what instruments you're playing, really.
It's violin and mandolin.
No, but also from the point of view, if your friend has got hearing issues, they're probably losing the bits anyway that original sound puts back in.
Yeah.
Because you lose your high frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And what the original sound is, it doesn't stop Zoom chopping them off.
All right.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting.